Good people. So, what to talk about? What to talk about? We think we're going to be here for an hour or so. We're going to think about some things, and we're going to try to put it into practice. So, one of the things I think is so important is to know what we want. It sounds so silly. What do you want? What do you want? But it's a really incredibly simple question, but we really struggle to know the answer. And the reason is because we're so caught up with our fears, what people think, or I shouldn't want that, or it's not possible, or I can't believe, especially about what people think. We are so overwhelmed by people's opinions since we're born, and this is so subtle, but we really don't notice it. It's so ingrained in us automatically, and we confuse it with being a nice person, So what do you want? So what we tend to do when we say what we want, we are very, we're very clear and what we want, and we'll do it no matter what. And usually that just means following attachment, and who cares who we harm on the way. But when it comes to kind of major choices, especially, let's say you're married, and let's say you have children, and let's say you really feel it's just not the right thing anymore. I mean, that thought, especially in some cultures, would not even arise in the mind. You could be living there in complete, utter misery, absolute misery, and it wouldn't even arise in your mind that there's even an option to change it, because somehow I think the expectations among each other in cultures, depending, are so powerful that we wouldn't even dare to want anything other than just have to sit here and be miserable for the rest of my life and go crazy. So it really sounds easy to say, what do you want? But it's really very confusing. I mean, I always quote this, but this one woman working with the dying, and she wrote a book with 5 greatest regrets of the dying. And the greatest regret, this is surprising, wasn't like not walking up Mount Everest or something. The greatest regret was I didn't follow my heart. I didn't really do what I knew I wanted. I did what I thought what was expected of me. And that's what I'm talking about here, I mean, that's one problem. Now, I remember in one person in a particular culture where family is very strong, and she was discussing how it was just, her father was just all these expectations. She could not fulfill them. She was completely going crazy. It was impossible for her. And then I even, just a suggestion that, have you thought of leaving? It was almost so shocking to her. So shocking, it was not possible for her to even think about it. So, of course, the really powerful thing to choose to do if you can't change the environment, and we talk about this all the time, is you change your mind. See, there's nothing wrong with changing something or doing something different, but this is the problem. We're so overwhelmed. What stops us? Well, what stops us, for example, being, being, let's say, a relationship. I'm just talking to, recently to some people, some friends yesterday, in a relationship. Let's say one person doesn't really want the relationship, and the other person really does. I mean, that becomes really tortured for some people, because you can't be honest, you can't say the truth. You try to be a good person, the one who doesn't really want, and the one who wants to be there, you don't see because you're as blind as a bat because of so much attachment, because attachment blinds us completely. I mean, we get so confused, to say what I want. So the thing is, the way the mind works, using the Buddhist model of the mind, the way there's all these different parts of our mind, all doing their job. And one part is called intention, like volition. And the way they talk is, intention is really the meaning of karma, because karma is like the mental decision to do something, and then everything follows from that. If our mind didn't intend to do or say or think something, we wouldn't do it. But because intention is so primordially programmed, we don't notice there's intention there. But I'm talking about now really making a conscious intention. Intention, I will do that. I want that. So one of the ways it manifests as a problem is it just seems impossible to want it, like, let's say I've got a friend, and we're both Buddhists, and she suddenly rings me up and says, oh, there's a Dalai Lama's giving a special retreat in Paris next week. Come with me. So if there you are with my husband and my kids and my jobs and my dramas, the first thing I will say, no, not possible. No, not possible. Couldn't do that. Not possible. No, no, no. Because it's out of the ordinary. It's, and the first thing is, no, my husband won't approve, or the boss won't give me time off, or the kids, I can't possibly leave the kids. So we often don't even say, this is my point here, we often don't even say, I want that. So if let's say you're a Buddhist and you really wanted Dalai Lama's teachings, then the first thing to say, your first thing is to say, yes, what an amazing idea. I would love to do that. Now, then you can start looking into it. Then you can see if it's possible. But what we do is we completely cut ourselves off at the knees and say immediately, no, not possible. So this is one approach, one difficulty. We don't think it's possible. We just, because we're so caught up in our fears, what people think of us, we can't, or even just, we just don't think it's possible. Like you can't afford it, for example. So we've got to really this is a simple one. I mean, it's powerful to know, yes, I want that. Yes, what an amazing idea. I would love to go to Paris for that retreat next week. Now, then you can investigate whether it's possible. And that's a different discussion. Maybe it's not, but we're not even brave enough to even say, I want it. This is our problem, So I think that's one very particular approach. We're even too scared to say we want it because all we do is we see the obstacles. Oh, it's not possible. I can't afford it. Oh, it's too difficult. I'll never get a flight. Oh, no, not get the time off work. So we see all the obstacles and we believe all the obstacles. We buy into the obstacles more than into what we want, to the possibility. So I think that's a really powerful one. So we've got to train our minds to stop first and hear it and think, yes, I would love to do that. I want to do that. This is a very particular one. Then you really make some courageous decisions then, Then you see if you find the way to make it possible. But that's very powerful. But that really takes courage because we're so believing in all the obstacles, or it's not possible, or people won't approve, or I couldn't possibly leave the kids for 2 weeks, or I couldn't leave the husband, or I won't get the time off. And much of that is because we're afraid of upsetting people. We call it being afraid of upsetting people, but really it's afraid of not being approved of, So we've got to have courage to even just to know, yes, I want, in other words, to prioritize it. So have your priorities clear, what's important. And that's an important point. It's like if you're studying to do something, that will be your priority. Everything comes second. Your studies, your deadlines, all your homework, everything comes second to that. People understand that. And that's great. So when it comes to our practice, let's say, we've got to prioritize. So if you're really trying to practice, and this particular retreat by the Dalai Lama in Paris, that's exactly about your practice. I mean, it should be the very first thing you could say, I absolutely want that, And then once you say, that's the interesting thing is, once you say anything, I want it, even if I want an ice cream, as soon as you say, I want it, already the process has started. But if you say, nah, it's sort of like saying, would you like an ice cream, Robina? Let's go and get an ice cream. Oh, no, not possible. No, the shop could be closed, or they mightn't have chocolate ice cream, or there could be too much traffic, or I don't know if the door's locked, I don't know if they're open. If all you do is see the obstacles, you're finished. You're done. You've lost it, You've got to have enthusiasm. You've got to know what you want. I mean, sounds a bit funny, but even know the bad thing you want to do, but we're too terrified to see that. I mean, you might want to kill your father, but it's so suppressed because you're so terrified of your own mind, you don't investigate. And then one day you suddenly find yourself stabbing your father. I mean, people talk like that, because we don't know our own minds. We don't know what the hell is going on. So saying what you want doesn't mean you do it. I mean, you need to know it's in there. Then you can decide, of course I want to kill my father, and you can do things to ensure you don't kill your father. But if you bury it away in there, or the other problem about saying what you want is you want something that is impossible, like in the relationship, It's evident the other person doesn't want you anymore, but we just can't bear to believe it. So you keep wanting and hoping and waiting and crossing your fingers and wanting until you die of misery, I mean, that's idiotic wanting. That's foolish wanting. What do you want, What do you want? We all know when you have to say, before you start to make a cake, You have to want to make a cake. If you say, well, I'm not sure, maybe I'll, not sure, then you won't get off your bottom. You won't go to the kitchen and you won't get the things to make a cake. But as soon as you say, I want to make a cake, that's the first step. Then you will do the steps to make it happen. That's what motivation means. In Buddhism, we do our prayers. They say motivation. It means that literally, but we don't hear it like that. I want to become a Buddha. I want to become a Buddha, I mean, that's an insane thing to want. We say all these prayers, I want to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, wow, 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 bodhicitta, blah, blah, blah. We happily say that. Or do you want to make $1 million? Oh, no, can't do that. Do you want to go to Paris next week for a retreat? No, I can't do that. I want to be a Buddha. Yes, I want to be a Buddha. I have no idea what we're talking about. But no, saying the thought, intention, as Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, the intention. It opens the door and then the process starts. Or like you've got all these dreams of starting a business or doing something, leaving your own job and starting your own business, let's say. And it's sort of in the back of your mind, maybe one day, But until you think it clearly, until you say that is what I want, and you put it out there strongly for yourself, until you say that, you won't take any steps to make it happen. And once you say it, now it's out in the open for yourself. And now you'll start to, even mentally, you'll start to take the steps. And then clearly, the more convinced you are of wanting that and its benefit, then you will really have enthusiasm to make it happen, So doing what you want is in its nature is not good, because if you want to kill your father, that's not cool. You've got to know it. You've got to know your mind. Or equally, wanting something that's blatantly obvious. Let's say, two people in a relationship. Everybody else can see it's not working, but because you're living in an attachment and fantasy world, there's nothing noble about and that's not wanting, that's hoping, crossing your fingers, that's not helpful. So knowing, in other words, it really comes down to just being conscious, becoming aware of what on earth is going on in our minds, but then not being passive about it, being proactive about it. I want to go to that retreat. I want to go on that pilgrimage. On the face of it, it might at this moment, someone I've been talking to, come on the pilgrimage in February, and this person is really, really busy. So immediately the answer is not possible. I couldn't get time off. No, not possible. Not possible. Not possible. It looks like it, But until you really want it, saying, I'm too busy is just an excuse. It's just being lazy. Because if we really want anything, look at this with attachment. If you really want that cup of coffee, you're going to find it. If you really want that ice cream, you will do whatever you can to get it when it's attachment. So to say, I'm too busy, and it sounds noble, no, I couldn't do that. It's too busy. I can't do that. That's just not true. If you've decided it's beneficial, if you've decided it's worthwhile, then you say, yes, I want it. And you imagine that 1 month in there, February, that's open. And, before you know it, suddenly things will fall into place. So we've got to be sincere with ourselves as well, very honest. So, okay, what's the basis for wanting something? What's the basis for something's being a valid thing to want? Put it that way. Because it's sort of fairly evident. It's not so cool to kill your father, or cheat on your boyfriend or steal or something. We don't want to be unethical. So clearly we're basing this in ethics. This goes without saying. But more than that, we're basing this on our own spiritual practice. If you're a Buddhist, you've decided you're a Buddhist and you want to become a Buddha long-term, many lifetimes, whatever, that's your goal. Then I think it was like you've got a map. You've got a map. Okay. And we know very well, if you're on a map, there's the end goal. There's a place where you're going. Like, I'm here now in Santa Fe, so I'm going to go to New York. My map will get me to New York. It's a really good analogy. My map will get me to Buddhahood. So that means it's obvious, isn't it? If I've got the goal, I want to get to New York. I want to go to New York. We live our lives like this, I want to go to New York. It's obvious. Every step I take in relation to getting to New York is logically a step that will get me to New York. If I'm driving to New York, I've got a map. So every mile I drive, it's obvious, will be in the correct direction. I'll take the right turnoffs. I'll go to the right places, and everywhere I stop, it'll be the right place. And every time I look on the map, I'll be getting closer and closer to New York. That's logical. Well, with our spiritual path, it should be the same, you know. So if you're not clear where you're going on this map, but let's say you are a Buddhist, let's say you've decided you're a Tibetan Buddhist and you're buying into the, you know, you're trying to practice the Tibetan Buddhist path, which the goal of which is to become a Buddha. That's the end result of your map. Then it's obvious every choice you make every day logically has to be a step you'll take, a thing you'll do, a thought you'll have, an action you'll do, a word you'll say that will bring you closer to your goal. It's sort of obvious, you know, and that will really keep us on track. That means the action we do, the word we say, the thought we have must be a virtuous thought, a wise thought, not a non-virtuous one, not an unethical one. That's logical because it's a path of ethics. So that keeps you on. So that's what motivation means. It sounds all kind of like, you know, you're trying to motivate yourself, get all kind of hyperventilating and exciting. Really, it's like, what's your goal? What's your purpose? What's your goal? Where are you going? What are we? So in other words, this is the thing we do always at the beginning, a little motivation. Sometimes there's more formal prayers for it. What's our goal? What are we meeting for? What's the purpose of this meeting? You know, so each of you will have your own, but the one I want to do is this typical Tibetan Buddhist one. You think, okay, why are we sitting here together? Why are we talking these words? So that, you know, the end result, these thoughts we'll have, these actions we'll do, will bring us one step closer to our goal on our map. That's what motivation means. What's your goal? Buddhahood. So everything we do and say and think in this little 1 hour should be something if we take away even a 1% of it, will be a step that we can take that will bring us closer to that goal. That's logical, just like on your map to New York. You wouldn't just, if you're driving to New York and you really do have a goal to get to New York, and then suddenly you see a nice turn off, it looks like, oh, that looks like a pretty street. I might take that street because it looks pretty. So you get completely lost. You will end up in Texas. Wrong place, you know. I mean, okay, if you've not got a goal and you just want to go for a drive and take you where you go, that's different. But if you do have a goal to get to New York, it is foolish to go by, you know, to take yourself in the opposite direction. So it is foolish if you're heading towards Buddhahood or heading towards even the simplest way of putting a spiritual practice to become a better human being, which means less neurotic, less deluded, less attached, less angry, less jealous, less miserable, more wise, more kind, more virtuous, more ethical, more fulfilled. Even if we just say it that way, forget the long-term goal, then obviously everything we do has to help us do that. So living in a fantasy of attachment or living in anger and resentment will get you completely somewhere else. It won't be where you want to go. So reminding ourselves of where we're going, reminding ourselves of our goal, even if you think of it, even as I just said, as becoming a less neurotic, more wise, more happy person, then the clearer you know that, and the clearer you are about the steps that enable you to achieve that, the more likely you will do them, you know. So what do I want? I want to become a better human being. I want to become less neurotic, less attached, less angry, less jealous. Why? Because they make me miserable. I want to be more happy, more fulfilled, and therefore more interconnected, more kind, more loving, more wise. Minimum that. So then whatever you say and do and think should lead you to that. But if you lose sight of your goal, then you just follow any old cute turn off, and before you know it, you've lost the plot. There's different things I'm talking about here. You know, this is one approach. The other one is knowing. This other one of being too scared to even say, what do I want? No, not possible. Not possible. Can't do it. Too expensive, too difficult, too much, too many. Can't do it. Not possible. That's our worst crime against ourselves, you know. Especially if it's something like, you know, you've got a family and you want to go off and do a month's retreat and leave the kids and husband. I mean, especially for women, that seems like the worst sin on the planet, to leave your children, you know. But if you really if you really feel this particular thing you're going to do, this particular practice, this particular job, or even if you're just doing a job and you're training, you've got to go off and do a month's training to improve your job. If it's really going to help you improve your job and improve your life and become a better human being, then you would make that choice, even though you might get criticized. But that's very scary to us because we don't want being criticized. We just want to be approved of. We want to be seen to be a good girl, you know. This is what I mean. That's exactly that point that that nurse found. The greatest regret, that's so shocking. The greatest regret among the dying people she interviewed, that I didn't really do what I wanted. I didn't follow my heart. I mean, we're assuming they don't mean killing their father. But I did what I thought I was expected to do, what other people think. This is the killer, you know. And we don't notice this. This is a very strong attachment. We don't, it's so subtle. It's so kind of pervasive in our lives. It's so absolute in the way we think. We don't identify it. It's quite fascinating. When we start to identify it, it's very shocking. Because the deepest attachment we've got, more than for sex or drugs or rock and roll or money or sexual pleasure, is being seen and approved of. This is the deepest one, the one that causes so much pain. It makes us so afraid, you know. And therefore makes us like in a particular, like in a relationship, for example, let's say, you know, like the one person in the relationship, let's say, hasn't got so much attachment anymore, and the other person has a lot of attachment. Well, sometimes the one person who hasn't got a lot of attachment is too afraid to say what they want to the other person. So they keep leading them up a garden path, and the person who's got all the attachment is happy for any crumb they can receive. They'll grovel for the smallest tiny insight that shows maybe she loves me after all or something, you know. I mean, that's when it's a total nightmare. We go mad. So we need to be clear, because with attachment, when you're in love with somebody, you're as blind as a bat, you know. And you can't see reality, quite literally, we can't. We're quite crazy because we just see the fantasy. We see what we want, but in the worst way. Because it's a fantasy. It's not an accurate one. It's not an accurate picture. So we live in a fantasy world. We're not realistic. The attachment blinds us terribly. And attachment makes us weak. Attachment makes us opposite to courageous. And in that type of relationship, the person who's got all the attachment just sits there waiting for the other person to decide, you know, waiting. It's like completely passive. It's disaster. It's like a nightmare, utterly miserable. So knowing what we want is also about having courage to take your life in your own hands. It can look selfish. I mean, I can see in my life, if I compare myself with all my sisters, there were 7 of us, and we had, you know, brother and 6 sisters, and our mother, our father died, and that was our mother. All my sisters were so kind, Mum, they took care of her. I didn't do that. I was really quite selfish. But I always knew what I wanted. And in the end, it's turned out good. I suppose you could say I was selfish, but it really wasn't. Because I mean, when you're a child, when you're the daughter or the son of a parent, you know, that you don't belong to the parents. You have a duty, and that's marvelous. You know, some children sacrifice their lives to their parents. That's an incredible action to do. But sometimes it's the tyranny of families that keep us, you know, locked. And too afraid to make our own decisions, too afraid to follow our heart and really leave and do what we really want, which is completely correct if you're the daughter or the son. You're correct to go off and lead your own life. Well, I did that easily. I mean, I was also selfish. I can see that, but I can see the advantage to it. My mother, I mean, all my other sisters were guilty about my mother and tried to make her happy and sort of were guilty about what they did and guilty about going out and leaving her and that kind of thing. I never had guilt, you know. I just rush off and do what I wanted. And my mother was, and I never I didn't feel guilty. She cried when I left here and cried when I did that. But sort of, it was my right to do that. It was appropriate, you know, it was my life. It's not being selfish. It's being wise. I mean, you know, we love the nice story of the Buddha, and it sort of sounds so all ancient, but think of it as real human beings, okay? He was like this person. He had a wife, he had children, he was a boss. He was a boss of a whole bunch. He was a so-called king or prince or whatever. I mean, he had masses of responsibilities. And he ran away and went to the desert to meditate, you know? So, I mean, you could say that was selfish, but very clearly, if you read the Buddha's story, it was a long-term goal, you know, the long-term goal. So even you could say, like I said, about a mother with children, it might be the right thing to leave that relationship and the children. And that's an intense decision to make. It's terrifying because of the criticism you get. So you've got to have some kind of clarity and some wisdom to know what path you're on, what road you're on, and then to make it with the right motivation, not just to harm people. Regard and let people criticize. It's okay. That's their problem. So we've got to delve in deep and look at ourselves, you know. I mean, so many people just live in relationships miserable, completely miserable. Both people, not just in one attachment. No one's attached to each other. They're miserable, stuck together because of the strong emphasis, certainly in the Christian world, in our culture, where it's bad to be divorced, you know. And one of the commonest things I heard Oprah Winfrey say, that the number of women who would say that what kept them not leaving their relationship, which wasn't working, was having someone was better than nothing. I mean, that's the most depressing thing to think, you know. You must have so much little self-esteem that if you've got anybody, it's better than having nobody, which really shows we haven't begun to look inside, you know. And of course, there's incredible pressure to have a relationship. There's incredible pressure to have a partner, children, this structure, you know. It's maybe less so now, that you're a failure if you don't have it, or you're a failure as a person if relationships don't work. That's really common. In other words, the assumption is that if you've got a good relationship, you've succeeded as a human being. I mean, the assumption that you've succeeded as a human being because you have a relationship that works, I mean, that's just ridiculous. We've got to succeed as a human being, period. Which means working on your mind, less attachment, less anger, less neurosis, less jealousy, more courage, more kindness, more fulfillment, more joy, then more kindness to others, then more ability to help others. That's the bottom line. See, whether you have 1 or 100 wives or husbands, it doesn't matter. But because the unit, you know, a partnership, living in a house together, maybe having children, is such a strong kind of sort of symbol of success in our culture. You're sort of like a failure if you haven't got that. I mean, that's just very bizarre, you know. So we've got to have courage to see our own potential, see what we're good at, to see what we want to achieve, and have the courage to take those steps, you know. Because fear and attachment and aversion and guilt and acting out of those can only ever bring suffering. This is the Buddha's very, very simple point. It's almost so simple we can't hear it. The main cause of each person's suffering, the main cause of our suffering, is the unhappy states of mind. Attachment, anger, depression, guilt, jealousy, low self-esteem, arrogance. They are the main cause of our pain. The main cause of our happiness is lessening those and therefore growing kindness, compassion, forgiveness, patience, courage, generosity, self-confidence. This is literally what Buddha is saying. It's almost so simple we can't hear it, you know, because we make it so complicated. So in other words, the choices we make, relationships, jobs, places we live, who we hang out with, should be determined by whether or not they help me do that job. If this relationship can help me, if I in this relationship can become less attached, less angry, less neurotic, more kind, more empathetic, great, do it. the job, the relationship, whatever. If it doesn't, then there's no benefit. I mean, everyone calls that, oh, you're a failure. You got to struggle and try. I disagree. It's ridiculous. It's just like torturing yourself. What for? The main job isn't to have a relationship. The main job is to be a wise, happy human being. Then whatever relationship you have will be successful. Guaranteed. Anyway, I'm chatting away here. Are there any questions or thoughts to bring up on the basis of this conversation? Nothing. Any points to bring up? No. Nothing there, Greg?
I have a question. Well, first of all, I wanted to ask your permission. I believe you said everything exists on the tip of a wish. Is that?
That's the way Lama Zopa says. Everything exists
Okay.
on the tip of the wish, the thought, I will, I want, volition, intention. That's what it means.
That is just an amazing line. I've already got it memorized. So that's,
well done.
I wanted to say I may use that in a song sometime. So
Absolutely,
hopefully that's
do it,
okay.
Greg. Wonderful. Well done.
And
Well done.
I also had a question. You're talking about intent and goals and how to set course. One of my goals is to take refuge soon. What would you say as far as a map for me?
Well, I think the way to typically do that would you'd know a center where it's happening. You'd have a teacher in mind that you like, and you would request.
That sounds simple.
That's the next step.
Okay.
Keep your ear open for centers you're involved with. I mean, this center, Geshe Sharab is the one who usually does it. He's like the resident teacher. Mm-hmm. Other people do it in different places. So you just keep your eye open in the different centers. And with this center, certainly Geshe Sharab, when he comes back, he might well be doing it in the future. Or any other teachers you might know that you like, you could request them. So that's the way to go.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Greg?
Yeah.
Good, sweetheart. Good. What else, people? You see, the thing about knowing what you want, it means also digging in deep. And we don't know the answer sometimes. You can't force an answer, but to look into our minds. The whole job of being a Buddhist is learning to be incredibly conscious, incredibly aware of your thoughts and feelings and emotions, and unpacking and unraveling and delving deep into them with a lot of clarity. That's the job, that's the job. So we will discover this, but many times, very straightforwardly, many times people, as I said, are literally afraid to even express what we might say is our dream, because you think, no, people won't approve, or I can't do it, I haven't got the money. So we keep it hidden, even from ourselves, even too afraid to want it. So, it's also, the thing is, just because you say you want something doesn't mean it'll happen, but it's a start. You bring it out. Like the first thing, if you're going to, you've got to say, I want an ice cream. The next step will be the way to get the ice cream. Instead of, oh no, the shop might be open, it's not possible, and then you give up. You've got to first say it clearly. Then you see if you can make it happen, we call this, we all know this. It's like if you want to build a building, that's exactly what you do. If you want to start a business, that's exactly what you do. You state the building, you make a plan, you then work out how many screws, how much engineering, what the cost is. It's all very practical. Then you proceed to do it. But if you don't have enough screws and you can't have enough money, then you won't do it. But you've got to start with the thought. And as soon as you do that, it starts to come alive. It becomes real. And then you get courage to follow it, It's very powerful. Instead of passively waiting for signs from other people to indicate what you should do, like being given permission. That's how we feel. We've got to be given permission by others. As these people said, and when the woman quoted in the book, instead of, not doing what I really want in my heart, instead I did what I thought I was expected to do, which is what other people tell you. And that's this passivity that we have. because we're trying to be good girls and boys, but we think we don't want to upset people. We've got to do what the world wants, what mummy wants, what people expect. We're all the time watching out there and trying to read the signs of what am I allowed to do, basically. Oh, I'm not allowed to do that. Oh, I can't do that. So that's the worst one. We become paralyzed with, just squashed by other people's, the tyranny of sort of societies and families' demands. That's very scary, you just suffocate.
I have a question.
Yes, Cynthia.
When do I know that this want does not become an attachment?
Because the only way to know that is when you understand what attachment is. I mean, because, you can do anything with attachment. I mean, you can start a business, let's say, or build a house. I mean, normally what we do is mostly, Cynthia, they're all things that are driven by attachment, because that's just how we are as human beings until we're pretty advanced. But we can, within that, we know we want to do something. We've got a family, so you want to build a house. You want to start a business. You want to start something that could be overtly more altruistic, or anything. But then you just decide, why am I doing this? Because I want to help me become a better person and I want to be of useful to others. So anything could be that. You can become a multimillionaire and do it with the most pure motivation to be of benefit to others. So if you have that goal, there's the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, isn't there? There's this lovely analogy. A bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So the wisdom wing is really all the work of working on yourself, becoming a better person, giving up attachment, giving up fears. That's the wisdom wing. And then the compassion wing, on the basis of success at the wisdom wing, is being of benefit to others. We all want that to one degree or another. So if everything you do, what you want to do, you do it with the motivation that it'll help you improve yourself as a person and help you be useful to others. And that's a pretty broad wish, and there's nothing wrong with that. Even if you sort of decide you're going to sit back and put your feet up and watch Netflix for an hour because you've really worked hard and you need a break. Well, don't get all guilty. Go, okay, I'm going to relax so I can really be relaxed, so I can then get up and do my work and I can be more useful. I remember one Lama, he said, when you do your meditation, you really do your meditation or your job, let's say. And then when you relax, you really relax. But the motivation for relaxing is the same as your motivation for doing your practice. It's to, you understand? So you make your motivation, then everything you do. One Lama I heard recently, when you've got a good motivation, I want to do this, the long term, of course, is so it'll lead me to enlightenment on my map, or even just to lead you to become a better human being, less neurotic, more kind, because that's what you're trying to do. Then so whatever you choose, it should lead you to do that. And if it doesn't, you're in trouble. So you make it that. I mean, if it's going to kill your father, you can't make that virtuous. But if you're going to leave your job, leave your family, take a new relationship, build a business, build a building, start an orphanage, whatever it is, do it as an activity that helps you become a better person and helps you become more useful. I say that's the broadest way possible to think. You make that your motivation, then that will cause whatever you do to become exactly that. If it's driven by attachment, you'll get neurotic, you'll become unethical, you'll harm others, and you won't succeed. Do you understand?
Of course, yeah.
So there are some actions that are overtly spiritual, but most of the actions we do in our daily life are not. But you make them spiritual by making your motivation. What am I doing this job for? So I can learn patience and kindness and learn my job better and learn to be a better human being so I can be a benefit to others. That's the broadest way of saying developing the wisdom wing and the compassion wing. Then everything you do will be driven by that. Then it will be useful. Do you understand?
Yes, perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So it's very broad. We shouldn't be narrow. We shouldn't be guilty and small-minded, Anything can be virtuous. Anything can be done for the benefit of others, no question. You can become a multi-billionaire, be useful to others. Nothing wrong with money. It's just a tool. We get all a bit guilty and fundamentalist, What else, people? Anything else? Questions have come up. I mean, recently, I know last year or some point somewhere, one of my old friends were discussing the motivation idea, and she was saying, well, how can I watch Netflix with a good motivation? I'm just being lazy, So I said, well, you've got two choices. You decide to be guilty to watch Netflix and just get miserable, or you decide you're going to relax and watch Netflix so you can relax and so you can then be a better human being and do your job better. So you got two choices. So to do it with guilt and shame just makes it a negative action. To do it with a positive motivation, it becomes a good action. The motivation is what determines the character of what we do. This is really, I think if we think about it logically, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, money is an obvious example. Making money out of self-centeredness and greed clearly becomes poison. Making money with a wish to be of benefit to others, including yourself, makes it virtuous. I mean, it's clear that money has no intrinsic nature as good or bad. Do you see my point? So Netflix has no intrinsic nature as good or bad. I mean, it's human beings doing something. You can learn a lot by watching a movie about human beings' minds. I mean, it's up to the view we have when we do something. The main factor that determines the character of the things we do, that is to say, the main factor that determines whether or not each thing we do leaves a positive or negative seed in our mind, which is the way the Buddhists talk about it, karma, is the motivation, not the action itself. I mean, even the typical one of a spiritual practice, you sit down and you do your practice, but you're completely self-centered and arrogant, That's not practice. It's just being arrogant and self-centered. It looks spiritual. The person sitting in the kitchen doing the dishes can be far more spiritual because their motivation is more altruistic. This is a really crucial point. And we can see this in the ordinary world. We know lots of people in business who are generous, who are ethical. It's incredible. It's an example, So it's all about the motivation. So that means clearly, what do you want? Being very clear about that and making that your reason for doing whatever you want. Then whatever you want will be beneficial, no doubt. Yeah. Any other questions, people? No, no questions. Brian, you're about to have a question, Brian. Is that a contemplative position? Is it?
You just answered my question, because I was thinking, when you hear people say, "Oh, I want to make money, I want to be rich," you think, "Oh, they're just a materialist." But if their intention is, they want financial security, but they also want to be a philanthropist.
That's exactly right. Precisely.
Give money to their favorite charities.
That's right.
Then the intention.
That's right.
Completely different.
Precisely. That's so clear, isn't it? Really, it's obvious. It's just really clear, And we know how we can be so inspired, Like I always love these three wives of those mega rich fellows: Jeff Bezos's wife, Steve Jobs' wife, and Bill Gates' wife. They've become amazing philanthropists, amazing proactive. They've been extraordinary, haven't they? They've been incredible what they're doing with their billions, really trying to be genuinely useful to the world. It's very impressive. It's very encouraging. And that's what's fascinating. Now it's another discussion, but it's a really good one. That the talk about one of the key talks about karma. Everything we do creates the cause for more of that. So the main cause of our receiving things is generosity, our being generous, The main cause is, and we can see in the world people who aren't generous, who are miserly, who are tight, who are mean, who cheat and lie around money. You can see it's a disaster, They're not happy, they harm others, they harm themselves. But if you really got ethics when it comes to money, especially money, because it's the measure of success, isn't it? It's what we use to be really ethical with it. And that even comes to when we pay taxes and things. I think there's such an impulse to, and all the clever accounting that's existing, especially among the very rich, to constantly only not want to pay taxes. This is a really interesting point. If every thought we have counts, Every thought we have produces the person we become. Then you've got to be really careful with thoughts like that. You've got to, you've got to, on the one hand, want to pay your taxes, want to help the world succeed. But at the same time, then there's nothing wrong with being strategic and being skillful, but to only be driven by this wish to do as much as you possibly can to avoid paying taxes. I mean, it's a really heavy mind to have. It's really negative. You are closing the door to receiving, Every thought counts. This is very powerful. We don't think this in our culture, but it's really logical. The person you become. Sorry, I forgot. I'm back again.
Thank you.
So anyway, I forget what I was saying, whatever. What I was saying, I forget. What was I saying? I can't. Any questions, darlings? Any questions?
Megan has a question for you.
Go on, Megan, talk to me.
Hi, Robina. Lovely to hear you. My question is about motivation.
Yeah.
In regards, there's something that I would like to do. And I believe the motivation is virtuous. However, and it involves going away. However, I have a situation where I have 3 rescue animals that they were animals that I myself on my journey here in Bali, they had just been discarded and thrown in rice fields, and I have them. So now my question is, in terms of travel, obviously I don't want to abandon them, and I, would look for other options. But I guess my question is, motivation can be two-pronged, because part of me is, I hear when you say don't focus on the obstacles, but there is also part of me that is, if I am successful, there is a relief in a lack of responsibility for them any longer.
I'm a bit lost though, Megan. Are you? I mean, I'm a bit lost now. I'm a bit lost. You have to explain to me. I mean, if you've got 3 animals you take care of, but then you really feel there's another thing you have to do, so you decide to find homes for them, and you do find homes for them, then I can't see the problem. Where's the problem? What's wrong with it?
I guess because a part of me would feel relief in not being responsible for them. And that's where I'm thinking, is that a failure?
Well, you've got to decide if that's you've got to decide if that's just being a self-centered thought. You've got to decide. And then you change it. It's your mind. You can decide and you can change it. I mean, because you've got 3 animals, if you're thinking that being responsible means you've got to sit there till the day they die doing nothing else, that's rather sort of nihilistic, I think. Even if you have 3 children. I mean, this is where you've got to decide, Megan. Everything's very dependent arising. Let's say you've got 3 children. I mean, the Buddha left his wife and kids. Okay, they had plenty of people to take care of them. If you abandon your children and they all die, I would suggest, no matter how good your motivation is, you're causing, hang on a second, I've just got to do something here. I've got a little creature and I want to get it outside. Hang on. Sorry. Are you there still? Yes, you are. Everything's falling apart here. If you harm sentient beings, then clearly that can't be useful. But there's no sort of principle. You're not trying to prove anything. Oh, I've got to be responsible. I mean, sure, you're going to have relief. But then maybe the thing to learn also from that, I mean, sometimes we can be very sentimental when it comes to taking care of animals. And this is what happens. People get all very, not saying you now, people get their pets and they're all excited. And then they bloody have to have them euthanized because it's too difficult to take care of them. So we've got to really even look at our reasons for even getting them in the first place. I mean, I'm just saying some things now, Megan. But I don't think if you can find homes, of course, it's a relief for you. That's okay. But maybe learn about your mind from this. But it shouldn't stop you from moving forward, I don't think. But learn about your mind, darling. I hear what you're saying, but are we communicating? Am I saying anything useful?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, it's like, even if it's 3 children, it might sound shocking, But if you know it's the right time for you to go off and do a 3-year retreat, you're at the right place at the right time in your spiritual development, the world will not be impressed. But if you really feel it is that you know it's the right thing, let's say you've got that wisdom, then my goodness, whatever the world thinks, it's the right thing to do, darling. That's what I'm talking about, the courage. I mean, mightn't have to make such an extreme decision. But you just to abandon the animals, that's different, isn't it? That's just being totally careless.
Yeah, totally.
But I
No,
think
that
we should
makes
look at the way we are with animals. I mean, we get all our little cute pets and then they become a drag. I'm not saying you. We've got to look at that, you know. First, in the beginning, you become all noble, you save them, and suddenly you're bound down the rest of your life taking care of little animals. I mean, this is the trouble with life. Life is difficult. I've got to make wise choices, you know. Learn from our choices. No, learn from our decisions, Megan. Megan, I think. Do you understand?
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Good, darling. What else, people? I mean, our mind is a minefield, there's no doubt, and we can trick ourselves into all sorts of wicked things. We're ridiculous, you know. We're not very clear with ourselves. We have to learn to be very clear and take responsibility, you know. It's true. But responsibility is not some kind of heavy thing. It just means learning from it and then trying to fix it. Learning from it and then trying to fix it, you know. Because if you want to, this is why, you know, if you wanted on a serious commitment to a spiritual path, that might well mean to go off for a 3-year retreat, a 2-year retreat, you go off and do this course over there. So clearly, if you choose instead to have a partner and 5 children, you've got to make your choices. You can't have it both. You can't do both, you know. You can't just walk away and be self-centered. You can find alternative solutions. And that's where certain people, I mean, just make the decision. I knew for myself very clearly, I didn't want that kind of responsibilities. I didn't want husbands and children and mortgages and those things. It might look selfish, but it was a very clear thing for me. So, you know, we're different. We've got to, sometimes it might be right to leave that one and take another choice. So you've got to, but I mean, in the Buddhist, you're talking very long term, you know, and using a lot of wisdom. You need a lot of wisdom to do this right. And we learn from our mistakes, you know, because it's our life. We make our choices. Time to go now. It's done, finished, 1 hour. So I hope there's something useful, thoughts, food for thought for all of us to continue to grow, know our minds. And the Buddha's view, Buddha's approach to knowing your mind is not complicated. Learn to distinguish between delusions and virtues. And of course, this is a unique Buddhist approach. The world doesn't talk like this. The psychological models in the world don't talk this way. It's very clear in the Buddhist approach to the mind. We can learn first theoretically what a delusion is, what a virtue is, and see the difference. And then we have to identify them in the mind. That's the key. So, hoping it's useful. Keep moving on our own journeys, never giving up, being brave. What do I want? Seeing what I want and see if we can achieve it. Having the courage. Jangchub, Semchub, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchi, Ke Panyampa, Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gong Du Babashuk. Okay, precious people. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Greg. Very kind. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, darling. Much love.
Thank you for